One.
Welcome to HBTV. I'm Harry Binswanger, the HB of HBTV. I'm a philosopher who advocates Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. Today we are discussing something that I think is an application of Ayn Rand's philosophy, but which she never wrote about. There's one statement she made in a question period at a Ford Hall forum that seems to be in line with what I'm saying, but this may not be strictly speaking part of objectivism. I guess it isn't. Even loosely speaking, it's not part of objectivism. Objectivism is what Ayn Rand wrote and approved of by publishing under her editorship. And that is all it is. It's a brand name. And so this is not part of objectivism, even if it's consistent with it, even if it's necessitated by it, as I think it is. What is it? Immigration. So I hold about the world's strongest view, the most radical view on this subject. There should be no laws about immigration. There should be no border installations. Now, this assumes you're at peace with your neighboring countries. People always ask me, what about Israel? Well, Israel's in a state of constant war. Rockets are being launched into their country by the surrounding countries almost daily. So obviously, under a declaration of war, a state of war, none of this applies. But we are not. A Cold War is not a declared war. Absent war, in normal times, there should be no people inspecting anything at the border. Crossing from Canada into the U.S., crossing from Mexico into the U.S., sailing onto the coast should be as effortless and transparent as driving from North Carolina to South Carolina. There should be nothing but a sign saying, "Welcome to America, the land of the free." What is the basis for this position I hold? Well, it's individual rights. It's the right to be free from the initiation of physical force causing you to subordinate your actions and your mind to the coercive actions of others. There's no right to stop another human being from entering onto somebody else's property or unowned, i.e. public property. You have the right to stop anyone from entering your property for any reason, but you do not have the right to stop them from coming on my property. Immigration is an issue of the rights of man, not of the rights of Americans, not of the rights of Mexicans, qua American or qua Mexican. It's the rights of a human being to go to where he is best, he judges best for his own survival, as long as he does not trespass on anyone's private property who doesn't want him there. But there are plenty of people who do want immigrants there, and of course the roads, so much property today in America is held by the government, and the government has no basis for using force to keep anyone off the roads as long as they're peaceful. So the reason I'm for individual rights is that just as I don't have a right to stop you and say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" on a public street, so I cannot delegate that right to my government. People who oppose immigration or want restricted immigration or want inspections for immigrations are thinking collectivistically. They're thinking, well, I couldn't do this. I couldn't stop people from moving freely. But it's our country. We can do what we want. We can set our restrictions. If you want to come to our country, you have to do X, Y, and Z. It's not your country. It is not anybody's country. The United States of America is lines drawn on a map where a certain military and police force have jurisdiction to enforce laws. You don't own the land. Now, looking at it in another way, turning the tables now on this issue of who owns what. A lot of hue and cry is made over the fact that we took Texas and California and New Mexico and Arizona from Mexico. And there's a return project where people say that shouldn't be the American country. It was stolen from Mexico. Mexico doesn't own anything. Mexicans own things. And what happens when the United States takes over a Mexican area? And this is, of course, in the 19th century. What happened? They were safer. They were better protected. They had no responsibilities to our government other than to not use force to violate anyone's rights. And they had no right to violate the rights of others. So they lost nothing. They only gained. The idea that a country has its territory, and if another country takes its territory, is wrong. It's collectivist thinking. Rights are being enforced by a certain government in a certain geographical territory. If that country wants to expand, I'm speaking collectivistically here myself, if the citizens of that country want to expand their jurisdiction to another area where the rights of people are not being protected as well, they have a perfect right to do that. Israel, for example, had the perfect right to assume governmental control over that area because they did not steal land. They did not take the land by force. They bought the land that they occupied, and the protection of rights of the Arabs who did not sell and who were living with them in that area, the protection of the rights is infinitely better and has always been than the rights. They don't even recognize the rights of Arabs in the surrounding countries that Israel did not occupy. So don't think of our country and the United States does this and the United States does that in regard to individuals. The United States is the government. It's the military and the police and the court system. The question then is it proper for our police and our military and our court system to be extended to some other region? Say Mexico, what was being enforced by the laws that were being enforced by the Mexican government. Well, it certainly was in the 19th century. Today, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure how much better our system is than the Mexican government system. But if it's an unfree country, the police, military, and court system of a free country has every right to extend its jurisdiction to that neighboring country and to take it over and absorb it. And the citizens there who were Mexicans but are now Texans or Arizonans or Californians of course, are infinitely relieved. They want to bless the American government for taking over from the corrupt Mexican government. I'm speaking again about the 19th century. So that's the other side. The you might think of what I'm saying as anti-American, anti-sovereignty. The other side of the same fact is that America is right. Manifest Destiny was right. We were right to impose our laws and on everybody that we came into contact with, including the American Indians, sometimes called the Native Americans because they immigrated here earlier than we did. It's not legitimate to call them that. To live in a free country where rights are protected is to your unquestionable interest. You want that. You pray for that. So sovereignty is the extension of jurisdiction. Sovereignty doesn't mean, hey, this is our country, you can or can't come here. We got it. You can't have it. That's not sovereignty. You own the land you own. You don't own anybody else's land. You don't own the land of the nation. All the people together don't have some collective form of ownership of the United States land. So if you take an individualist perspective, you see that sovereignty is not an issue of ownership. That sovereignty just means, will the sheriff have to stop at this border? Because he's not allowed to enforce the law, the American law or his country's law, whatever it is, beyond the borders. Or do we set a new border? But there has to be some border. The government enforces laws within a geographical territory. And if it's a rights-protecting government, a free government, then it has the right to expand, or has the authority. I guess government doesn't really have any rights. It has the moral sanction to expand its jurisdiction as far as is feasible. And it has no impact on sovereignty that you're not protecting your borders. Sovereignty is not about protecting your borders. It's, except in a sense, it's about protecting your borders from the neighboring countries' police and military. To protect our sovereignty means Canadian police and Mexican police do not enforce Canadian law and Mexican law within our boundaries. That's what sovereignty means. So, open immigration is a consequence. It's not even a thing. It's not even a thing. It recognizes that people have rights as people. What is the source of rights? The fact that man survives by the use of his thinking and applying that thinking to produce values. That has nothing to do with his nation, the nationality. It has nothing to do with the police force that's currently in his area subjecting him to their authority, properly or improperly. He has rights by nature of what he is biologically. Morality is based upon life, the individual life, as an ultimate value for that individual. That value can only be achieved through the use of reason to guide your life to produce values, not to seize them, not to destroy other people, but to live as an independent being. That has nothing to do with your geographical location. So the case for open immigration, and we're going to get into answers to objections, rests upon people have rights. People have rights. Foreigners have rights. Americans have rights. Every human being has inalienable rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, there are a lot of economic fallacies that listeners to our show here probably don't have, but I'll just mention. The idea that the standard of living is lowered by having more population density is a solid economic fallacy. And no economist, well, you can never say no economist. The vast majority of the economic profession, even though they're not for laissez-faire capitalism, recognize that. Higher population density increases the division of labor, cuts down on transportation costs, and means that you can have more specialization, which leads to higher productivity, which leads to a rising standard of living. And of course, the history of the United States, the fastest growing country up until the time it gave up capitalism, was of increasing immigration all the time. Oh yeah, you think that's because we had a lot of open space. Well, guess what? We have more open space than almost any country on earth. I've done calculations like if you move half of the world's population into the United States, you counting just the land area, it would be, I believe the numbers, I can check this, no more dense than the state of New Jersey. And most of the state of New Jersey is rural. They call it the Garden State. Yeah, there's a little density around New York City, but go to the south of New Jersey. I know it would be less populated than England. So there's no difference now and in the 19th century in terms of what can be sustained here. And what are the richest areas in the country? The ones with the highest population density. New York City, Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and Brentwood, parts of Los Angeles. These kind of places are the ones with the highest standard of living. As a former New York City resident, I can testify that population density is a good thing, at least under a free government. I left New York City mostly for the weather here in Florida, but partly because the politics had become so left that I couldn't abide it anymore. Now, immigrants don't take jobs, they make jobs available. They create the opportunity for new jobs, for new hires, and the ones that are displaced move on to better jobs. They take the lower rung if they're uneducated. If they're more smart, intelligent, like Sergey Brin, they create high-tech companies. Most of Silicon Valley is immigrants. A good proportion of the amazing proportion of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are immigrants. And of course, you're not going to get hearing now, I hope, for the idea that immigrants take jobs when every store has "we're hiring" flying. I saw one today, like a 12-foot banner in front of Walmart. "We're hiring." You can't get people. So there's a desperate need for labor of all kinds. And yet immigration is being withheld. Now you think, oh, Biden is open. Biden is letting everybody come in. That's not a 20th of the immigration we need. It's claimed that 2 million Mexicans are coming in. We need like 40 million Mexicans. And 40 million, not just Mexicans, but people from all over the world. We are a country of 330 million. To grow just 10% would be 33 million new people. And we need it for Social Security payments, because the Ponzi scheme is going to blow up because there's not enough young, able-bodied workers to support the retirees and the graying workforce here. We're going to have a second session on this because I can't cover everything in a half an hour. A lot of people who are not leftists say it's fine to have open immigration, or at least greatly expanded immigration, if they wouldn't come here and drain our services. Their children go to our schools, they fill the emergency wards of hospitals, they come and get on welfare. Well, those arguments are immoral. What you're saying is, I've got mine. I don't want anyone to be able to compete with me. I don't want anyone to have what I have. But they're not immoral in this sense. The solution is to abolish welfare. What? The solution is to abolish welfare. If they're not going to get any handouts, then they just rely on private charity or work. They come here to work. It's like an indisputable fact that the number of, I guess it's disputable because you can buy statistics for anything. It's a disputable fact that the number of immigrants on welfare is a smaller percentage than the number of Native Americans. I don't mean Indians, us who are on welfare. And here's the real kicker, which no one knows about. Under the Clinton administration, there was a bill passed, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, familiarly known as PRWORA. Now, you've never heard of that, unless you've heard me talk on this subject. It's a law that withholds welfare, federal welfare, from immigrants for 5 years after arrival. I support this legislation, and every state should have it. You see, the leftist states won't do that. So California gives state aid, and other states, according to how leftist they are, give welfare on the state level. But at least the federal welfare most of it is withheld for 5 years. So we know these people are not coming to get federal welfare at any rate. And as to the hospital emergency wards and the schools, come on. How much money is that? How much money is that is different from the money that should be spent? That's a vague sentence. Yeah, a lot of money is thrown away on education. The immigrants coming here don't get an education any more than, in the public schools and most of the private schools, any more than the children of American citizens get an education. They don't even get indoctrination. I could get behind that. Indoctrination would be better than what we have now, which is putting the children's brains through a blender. The education system that we're dumping more and more and more money into every year is removing the child's nascent ability to think. It's damaging them. It is not merely indoctrinating them. If they knew something and had the ability to recognize what an argument is and what a proof is, then indoctrination would have its own self-correcting feature, which is they know how to think their way out of it when they grow up. But as Ayn Rand wrote about, in the early 70s, the educational system has been taken over by John Dewey's progressive education, which places social adaptation primary and facts not even secondary, but in last place on the agenda. Facts and principles in the ability to think. The last place on the curriculum. Take a look at what your child is being taught if you're a parent. I mean, get some of the textbooks and listen to what's going on in class. One of the benefits of the Zoom into the schools is you can hear what's going on. It's hair-raising. So yeah, okay, deprive them of welfare. And while you're at it, deprive American citizens of welfare. I'm for that. What about crime as our last topic here? Well, if you open the borders, all these rapists and criminals will come in. I saw on Fox, this guy has been deported 5 times who killed somebody in California. And no Americans ever killed anybody. No citizens ever killed anybody. The actual statistics, another disputable fact, because if you go to anti-immigration websites, you'll see different. But at reason.org, I got this quote. If you want to find a safe city, first determine the size of the immigrant population, says Jack Levin, a criminologist at Northeastern University of Massachusetts. If the immigrant community represents a large portion of the population, you're likely in one of the country's safer cities. San Diego, Laredo, El Paso, these cities are teeming with immigrants, and they're some of the safest places in the country. New immigrants are the lifeblood of this country. They refresh the American spirit because they come here because they like America. Well, you say they're just coming because they like the money. Yeah, and the American dream is half about money. It's freedom and wealth. You can't separate the two. What the haves have, said Ayn Rand, the have nations have, and the have-nots have not, is freedom. The whole basis of rights, including property rights, is that the free mind is the source of the creation of wealth. So, admitting in more people is using the ultimate resources, Julian Simon called it, people's minds to create more wealth. As long as any immigrant who comes in produces as much as he consumes, he's not a net drain on us, and almost all of them produce more than they consume, as evidenced by the universally known fact that they send money home to their families in the countries from which they came, particularly if it's a poor country like Mexico. How does that happen? Are they sending home welfare checks? No. I live in Florida. All the workers who tend to properties that are here are immigrants. Just today, I saw a group of them coming into my development, and I said, "Buenos dias." And they answered me back in Spanish. You just assume that someone's coming to landscape, clean your pool, clean your house, do these chores, are Mexican, or at least speak Spanish in some form or another. And they will rise up like in Cuba, like in Miami, the Cuban immigrants who escaped Castro starting in about 1960 have become very wealthy and are employers and entrepreneurs. So that will happen with all groups because talent and ability are properties of the individual, not of some way that you look or the food that you eat or the country that you came from. Well, it's now 4:30. Have we got a lot of questions?
We have one question on immigration.
Okay, let's take it. I'll see if I can answer it quickly.
Yeah, it's from Michael. He asked, I know you said we should let criminals from other countries in if they've already served their time, but what if the person is coming from a country that only gives you a 3-year murder sentence?
You mean like the United States? Generally, the laws of other countries are stricter than the U.S. But yes, I'm in favor of adapting the issue on criminals to what the law is in that country. For instance, if a person's a fugitive from Russia or Turkey or China, well, I guess you're not yet a fugitive from China, unless you're a Uyghur. If you're fleeing a dictatorship and you're broke out of a gulag, you are not going to be returned in a good country. Good country will not return you, not extradite you to the country you're a fugitive from. But this is a topic I'm going to take up next Monday. Why criminals are not also not to be ex-cons are not to be excluded. Fugitives, yes, if it's a free country, but not people who have served their time. Okay, thank you for listening, and next time we'll cover some of the harder questions about immigration. These I regard as the easy questions, open and shut. See you next Monday at 4 o'clock. Goodbye.